have the technology. Let's make the technology work. So as we let some more people log in, I'd like to welcome everyone. You can leave your comments or questions in the Zoom chat or in the Facebook comments, or you can email us at programs@albemarlehistory.org. Send us any questions during the presentation you'd like us to address. Excuse me. We'll have a Q&A session at the end after Sam's presentation and after a few remarks from Kelsey Cox. But a few announcements before we get started. With some of our upcoming programs. On June 22nd at 7 p.m., I will be participating in a panel discussion for the Jefferson-Madison Regional Library. They have a program called Forgotten History of Penn Park, Unmarked Graves of Enslaved Penn Park. This is based on the city's work that they did to uncover the unmarked burials of enslaved individuals outside of the family cemeteries, the Gilmer, Craven, and Hotop family cemeteries, oldest which dates back to the colonial era. They found 40 unmarked graves, and all very likely people enslaved at Penn Park. We'll have a panel discussion. We'll have Ben Ford, the principal investigator with Ravenna Archaeological Services, Jeff Werner, who is the City of Charlottesville Historic Preservation and Design Planner, and myself, the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society Executive Director. So we will look at what led to the examination of the site, the process of the investigation, and the efforts that we're hoping to come up with to identify and eventually commemorate those buried there. So with all of this information, Sterling's going to be working the technology side of this and posting into the chat and the comments section information how you can sign up for these. This is a program with JMRL, so you go to their website. We also have a special program coming up on June 29th at 6 p.m. We will be joined by Chris Sempter. He's the curator at the Poe Museum in Richmond. And Chris's presentation is called The Independence of Poe, a Declaration of a Different Sort. He will explore the idea that just as Thomas Jefferson declared the nation's political, religious, and architectural independence from England, a young Edgar Allan Poe declared America's literary and artistic independence. So Chris is going to demonstrate how Poe's time in Albemarle County while he was at UVA inspired him to break American literature free from European models and values and set a new path. So that's on the 29th of June at 6 p.m. And like I said, Sterling will put some information in the chat so you can click on those links to register for that meeting. And also stay tuned for some upcoming programs later this summer. We're going to be announcing a pretty large oral history project that the Historical Society will be undertaking to explore an important period in our local history. So be hanging on that. We'll get you some more information later. When you registered on Zoom for this program, you had an opportunity to sign up for our email newsletters. But if you didn't, or you were joining us on Facebook, you can send us an email asking to join our mailing list to keep in touch with us. You can email us at info@albemarlehistory.org. But it is not required. We encourage everyone in attendance to become a member of the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society. Your support helps us to produce this speaker series and to produce all of our free online programs that connect you with your local history. And I'm going to kind of break from the script a little bit here and let you in on some of the behind the scenes information going on. If you've been following the Historical Society's work over the past year, you may have noticed that we, the staff, board of directors, or volunteers, we've been working to change the society's image to embrace our vision and mission. And maybe Sterling, I'll put you on your toes. Could you post our vision and mission? Let people, see what I'm talking about here.
I just did.
Good. You're ahead of me here. We've been working to tell important local history stories with our online programs, our walking tours, our annual magazine, which in 2020 we actually had to catch up with because we had not published 3 volumes, and we caught up with that. We are connecting and partnering with community organizations like Foxfield Races for this program, or the Jefferson Madison Regional Library to commemorate the public library's 100-year history. Or we're jumping in when needed, like with what we've done recently, and you might have seen in the news, to help save Hatton Ferry, the last cold ferry in the United States. Many of our activities, like much that has happened over the past year, has been hidden under the dark cloud of COVID, but we have been finding the silver lining, connecting with our local community in this online virtual world we live in today, while also preparing for when we can get back to our new post-COVID vaccinated, somewhat sort of normal. But with all this, the society has been in pretty bad financial shape. And when I started in April 1st of last year, I took that upon myself. We've spent over 50% of our reserves to simply try to right the ship, position the Historical Society to be an important voice for local history. So I'm just gonna put it out there. The Albemarle-Charlottesville Historical Society needs your help. We have funds to get us through our budget year to December, the end of this year, but the finances for 2022 do not look very good. So if you support local history and you want to see its importance grow through our work, I would like to talk to you. I want to talk with you about what we're doing now, about plans, about how your financial support can turn this significant challenge we face into an opportunity. So I ask you, send me an email, give me a call. If local history is important to you, then join us and support this work. And I'll post my own email and phone number. I won't rely on Sterling that, and I'll put that in the chat and comments box. And I look forward to connecting with you. So thanks for your attention with that. And now what I'm going to do is let's get this history program started. So let me welcome Sterling Howell to the Zoom podium. He is our programs and volunteer coordinator, and he's going to introduce and welcome our speaker.
Thank you, Tom. Hello, everybody. I'm Sterling Howell, and we'd like to welcome you to our Albemarle-Charlottesville Historical Society speaker series with Sam Towler. The title of Sam's talk is The History of Foxfield Farm. Sam grew up near Foxfield at Schelford Farm. He is a graduate of Albemarle High School and James Madison University. He worked at Mickey Hamlet Law Firm as a legal assistant for 25 years. And is now retired. Sam has been very active in local history, having compiled 2 reference books of court records, written 2 articles for the magazine of Albemarle County History, was editor of the Central Virginia Genealogy Association newsletter, a founding member of the Central Virginia History Researchers, has done volunteer research work in African-American genealogy, and has volunteered at the Albemarle Circuit Court, conserving and working on an index of chancery cases. Sam also currently serves on our Historical Society Board of Directors. And after Sam's presentation, we will have a chance to speak with Kelsey Cox, the new Executive Director of Foxfield Races. Thank you for joining us, Kelsey. Kelsey has a BA from Gettysburg College and a Master's of Teaching in Elementary Education from UVA. She has been an educator at several institutions, most recently as a first grade teacher at Burnley Moran Elementary. And she can introduce herself more later and tell us about all the great new adventures she is undertaking with Foxfield Races. Thank you both, Sam and Kelsey, for joining us today. Now, Sam, I will turn it over to you to tell us all about the history of Foxfield Farm. But if you give me just a second, Sam, I will share your presentation with everybody. If it looks good, Sam, go for it.
All right. You can go ahead and, so I'm going to go over a title search from the very beginning of Foxfield up to the present day. And I'm also going to include a little bit about the Hunt Country Store at the corner. Okay, you can go ahead and turn it to the next page. So the first owners were the Monacan Indians, and you can find a copy of the John Smith map at the Library of Virginia website. And this is the 1624 John Smith map. I'm going to be going through 30 some slides in 40 minutes. So I'm going to be going pretty quick, but you can always look at them later. So we'll go on to the next slide. I don't know that any arrowheads have ever been found at Foxfield. Bill Bailey, a cousin of mine, Sheriff George Bailey's son, said that he found some arrowheads at his farm when he was young. That's more on the Turn Mountain Road near Ivy, but I don't know that any arrowheads have been found at Foxfield. In 1918, Mr. Bushnell did an article about the Monacan Indians, and he mentions that Jumping Branch might be coming from an Indian name. So Jumping Branch Farm and Jumping Branch Creek is across the road from Foxfield. So most of what I know about the Indians, any of y'all can get off the internet, but the only unique thing I'll mention is I was looking through the Pilsen papers at the UVA, and it's mentioned in 1830 in Albemarle that medicine was bought from an Indian doctor. And I'm not saying that there was still a Monacan Indian in Albemarle in 1830. He could have moved here from somewhere else, but the Pilsens lived out near Greenwood, so we're probably talking about the mountains of western Albemarle. Or it could have been a free black with Indian ancestry that was an Indian doctor. Unfortunately, the papers don't give his name. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. If you want to find out who had the first patent of where you live, Mike Craybill has done a great job of mapping all of them. And you can go to the Albemarle Circuit Court where the deed books are, turn around and look behind the copier, which is what I did. And he took a modern day map so you can see the modern roads. And I took a picture of the Foxfield area, and that's what we're seeing here. So, and you can get the first patents all over Albemarle where you live or anywhere. So that's the easiest way of doing that. And Mike also sells his maps, but I just go in and take my camera and take a picture of it. Okay, so Robert Lewis patented 3,250 acres in 1736. And this is Mike Craybill, a photo that I took of Mike Craybill's mapping of it. And it's in the deed book room at the courthouse. All right, we can go on to the next one. So in 1779, Benjamin Lewis, executor of Robert Lewis deceased, sold 1,000 acres to Thomas Garth Sr., and so he became the next owner. Now, if you look a little bit down, I think we can go on to the next slide. So Thomas Garth died. Thomas Garth Sr. dies in 1812, leaving a will in Albemarle. And he mentions in this will that he left the Lewis tract where he lived. So we knew that Thomas Garth Sr. was living on this tract because he owned other tracts in Albemarle. And Jenny Garth, who lived at the old Garth house that we knew. So we're pretty sure that the old Garth house dated back to Thomas Garth Sr. So I got a picture of it when the Garths just recently put it up for sale, and it was just torn down this year. So I got Jenny Garth had the tear down picture on her. So I had put that the house was still standing, but it has been torn down now. Okay, so we can go on to the next slide. So this is putting together about 4 different surveys. So I'm going from Bezaleel, Garth. Now I have wondered if Wingate Farm dates back to it shows Bezaleel Garth about in that area. So if Wingate Farm dates back that far, maybe that's Bezaleel Garth's house. So the Garths owned all the way from Bezaleel Garth to the old Garth House area, and this is putting together 4 maps. So one of Thomas Garth's daughters married John Fretwell, and they're the ones that ended up with the tract where Foxfield is. We can go on to the next one. This is a very simple Fretwell family chart. So the Fretwells owned Foxfield until 1890. Frances Fretwell, who apparently never married, was the last owner. And I noticed in her will, she mentions she wants tombstones made for her family, which are between the house and the Garth Road. So I was sort of puzzled because if you look online, you'll see that Mildred Garth and John Fretwell are buried at the Garth Chapel, which is past Foxfield, going out the Garth Road and on the right at Ellensville. So it must be that later on in time, the Fretwell Cemetery was moved to the chapel. Since in 1890, apparently it was still on Foxfield. Okay, we can go to the next slide. So the 1864 map of Albemarle shows landowners, and you can find this map at the Library of Congress website online. If you just Google Library of Congress Albemarle map, you'll see several maps, well, 2 main ones of Albemarle. And so Fetty, which is shown on the Civil War map, it was done about 1864, is actually Fretwell. So we can go on to the next one. Now, this map here is the 1875 map of Albemarle, and it also has landowners. And so on this slide, I'm trying to show where all the Garth farms are. And J.T. Fretwell is who they're showing owning the Foxfield area instead of Frances. Maybe Frances Fretwell lived with her brother. I'm not sure. So if you want the 1875 map, you can just Google Library of Congress Albemarle map, and you can get a copy of it, and you can blow up certain parts and save it. So I use that pretty often. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. So in figuring out who were the African Americans on the farm, in Albemarle and all the surrounding counties, in 1867, right after the Civil War, when they're doing the personal property tax, that's not real estate, that's like horses, cows, or anything like that. All the African American men over 21 years old who had to pay the tax collector wrote down where the African Americans were living. And so Bob Verna showed us this a couple years ago. And so Senator Stanton and Bob went and got, the records are not at the courthouse. You have to go to the Library of Virginia to get it. And then Senator Stanton and I took the information and punched it into Excel, which is available at the Albemarle County Historical Society or at the Jefferson School. So this is basically, it says the residence, employer, or employment of male African Americans who had to pay the tax. So women did not have to pay the tax unless they were executor of the estate. So if you want to find out where the African Americans were before the Civil War, the 1867 personal property tax is where to look. And they did this to about 1870. Fluvanna did it, Nelson, Buckingham, only half of Augusta County. And so one of my goals is to figure out every county in Virginia who did it and who didn't, maybe, and collect all the records. Okay, we can go on to the next one. So I did, since I've already showed you where the Garths were living, I did a chart of where does this personal property tax list say where the African-American men who are paying the tax are living. So at the Fretwells, we have all the people that I show, and the main ones are John Carter, William Carter, Thomas Carey, that I know the most about. So once I get that, I'm looking at marriage records to figure out what I know about it. Okay, we can go on the next one. So then I took post-Civil War marriages of Carters and looked at them and see from the names. And so this is what I think some of the Carter family was. And I can't go over, I don't have time to go over this in detail, so we'll just go on. I'm just telling you, if you want to look at the Carter family, you can come back and look at it later. And this is more Carters here. And okay, we can go on to the next slide. And even more Carters. I noticed that there were that the Fretwell family owned two people called Fielding. And then I noticed in post-Civil War Albemarle, there are two guys named Fielding Carter. So I'm pretty sure this other Fielding Carter is related to the other Fielding Carter. Okay, we can go on the next one. Now, did any of the African Americans buy land right after the Civil War? And the answer is yes. So Tom Carey is living at Foxfield, and he goes right down the road from Foxfield. Like if you're going out the Garth Road, and when you get to go past Schelford Farm, when you get to the river, look to the right, and the 40 acres right there, Tom Carey bought in 1870. And then the Carey family owned that land right by the river until about 1964, when the older generation died, and there was a chancery case to sell it. And lo and behold, Grover Van Devender, who owned Foxfield, went to the auction, and he bought Tom Carey's old land in 1964, which first confused me because I thought maybe Tom's Carey land was at Foxfield, but no, it was just a few miles west, right at Meacham's River on the right. There is a survey of the land. Nelson County also gives where African-American men were living, and there's a Washington Carey at the Garths in Nelson County, and one of the Garths moved to Nelson County. So Tom Carey's father was Washington Carey, a different Washington Carey. So the Carey family in Nelson County have to be related to the Carey family at Foxfield. Okay, we can go on and go to the next one. There was also a Harris family at Foxfield, and I was able to find out quite a bit about them. Since we're short on time, I won't go into this in detail, but you can always come back and look at it later. So I think the main African Americans at Foxfield were the Carey family that I could find the most of, and they bought land. And by coincidence, Grover bought theirs. And then you have the Harris family, and you had the Carter family, and there's probably others, but these are the ones that I could find the most of. Okay, we can go on to the next one. So Jane Smith said when Tony Harris died in Georgetown that he still worked for the Garths at the old Garth house. And I'm showing you here where Tom Carey's 43 acres was from 1873 to 1964. Like I say, since Grover bought it, I thought, gosh, maybe the Careys bought it Foxfield, but no, it was down the road. All right, we can go on to the next slide. So when Francis Fretwell dies in 1890, There was a survey recorded of her land, and that's what's on the right here. What happened is W.H. Sindlinger and Cora buy it in 1890, and they keep it 5 years, selling in 1895 to Ezekiel Wilhoit and his wife, Georgia. Ezekiel then dies in 1819, and in 1922, in settling Ezekiel Wilhoit's estate, most of the farm, except the southern half that I show there, was bought by Clarence Wilhoit, who was a son, and his wife Nancy for $22,000. Again, it mentions that the old Fretwell cemetery between the house and the road will be reserved, and that's in the 1922 deed. And yet the Fretwells are at the Garth Chapel, as far as I can tell. So on the left is a map of Grover Van Deventer's lands, and on the right is Francis Fretwell's survey that's recorded at the courthouse. Okay, so now we're down to the Wilhoits owning it. Now, I didn't take the time to figure all this, but I had done another case when I was going through the chancery cases, and I did this chart on the Wilhoits. So I said, I'm just going to reuse this. One interesting, if you've ever been up to Ruckersville and you get to the stoplight and you look to the right and you see this old building on the right. So one of the Wilhoits married a Delaney, and they're the ones that built that old store there. That's like an antique shop. And there was a Wilhoit Motors in town that I would think would have some connection to the Wilhoits at Foxfield, but I don't know exactly. Okay, we can go on to the next one. I went to the Albemarle Historical Society and pulled out their Foxfield folder, and lo and behold, in 1980, the Daily Progress put up these pictures of the old Wilhoit house at Foxfield, with them on the porch and the house and some other ones. So I don't know if the old Wilhoit house was also the Fretwell house, or if it's still standing in Foxfield. I'm hoping others will tell me that. So I don't know if this house still exists on the farm today or not. So that's one thing I wanted other people to tell me. So I got this out of the Historical Society folder, which keeps these folders in town. Okay, we can go on to the next one. So while we're on the Wilhoits, I'm going to take a break and talk about the Hunt Country Store. So the people that own the farm across the street sold the corner 2 acres to the Albemarle County to put a school there. The thing is, they never went to the courthouse and recorded the deed. Then the Albemarle school system sold it to Ezekiel Wilhoit, who owned Foxfield, and never recorded that deed. Then finally, a deed book 122-419, whereas a good many years ago, the Ivy School District purchased 2 acres at the fork of Free Union and Whitehall, or Garth Road. The school board never received a deed. The school board then sold 2 acres to Ezekiel Wilhoit, but he never received the deed. So Dr. Farish owns the tract. The 2 acres was cut off some, so all parties now sell to James Downer Bruner for $23, the 2 acres right at the corner, and that's at 1901. So James D. Bruner built a store at the corner and apparently borrowed the money from Ezekiel Wilhoit, who owned Foxfield. And in 1906, Wilhoit foreclosed on him because he was behind on his payments, and sold to Samuel Woodson 2 acres for $1,000, including the buildings. So that's why we know the Hunt Country Store was built between 1901 and 1906 by Mr. Bruner, and then the Woodsons took it over. And the Woodsons owned it for many years. So James Downer Bruner and Elizabeth then built the country store and Samuel Woodson bought it from them. Okay, we can go on to the next slide. What I didn't know and never seen when I was a little kid in the 60s, apparently a rival store across the street, like if you're going on the Free Union Road, was a rival store. And this rival store was built before 1917. O.R. Allen bought the rival store in 1917 due to the Jones versus Jones Chancery case. Allen defaulted on his loan in 1928, and the buyer was Samuel Woodson, who owned the other store. So, you know, sometimes you say, if you can't beat them, buy them. So Samuel Woodson, who owned the older store, bought out his rival. And then at some point after 1930, that rival store, they tore down. Also, when you look to the right, a little drawing of the Hunt Country store is recorded in the deed books when they were, I think it was with Texaco. That might be another slide. So I think we can go on to the next slide. So I'm getting this picture of the Hunt Country store from their Facebook page. If you notice on the drawing down at the bottom, so Samuel Woodson and his wife Anna continued to own the store until Samuel's death in 1941. He left it to his widow Anna. In 1949, she deeded out small parcels of the 2 acres to her daughter, Anna Fielding, and granddaughter May Glasgow. She reserved the road back to her house. I think back then, Albemarle didn't have the rule that you had, when you were deeding out land, you had to have at least X amount of acres. So when you look at the little house to the right of the store, that was one of the houses of the daughters, and there should be a house behind the house. You'll also notice that the canopy, when Woodson was getting gas from Texaco, they did this little drawing. Notice that the canopy in front of the building used to be much larger. Okay, we can go on to the next. Okay, back to Foxfield again. So I just continued the store up to about 1950. So then by deed in 1922, going back to the Wilhoit, so Clarence Wilhoit, the son of Ezekiel and Nancy, bought it and paid the rest of their siblings $22,000 borrowing money. And then unfortunately, they couldn't pay the $22,000. And in 1925, the bank foreclosed on them, and their farm was auctioned in February 1925 to Hugh Garth, unmarried, and he paid $11,000, or about half of what Clarence Wilhoit paid for the farm. So Garth paid $1,000 cash and assumed the $10,000 loan of the Wilhoits. And Hugh Garth kept it 4 years and sold it for $20,000 to Edward M. Sturhan, I think is how you pronounce it, in May 1929. Luckily, so Hugh Garth was able to double his money, and luckily he was able to sell it right before the crash happened. Edward Sturhan, 1 month after Edward Sturhan buys Foxfield from Hugh Garth, he incorporates a company, the Dixie Flying Service, of which he is the president, and he sells the land to the company. And then when he went to Texaco, or it was another oil company, to get a lease, they recorded in the deed books a map of the airfield at Foxfield, and that's what you're looking at to the right. They said, so Texas Oil Lease was right beside the hangar that's still there at Foxfield. And they said, you can put your gas tanks anywhere you want except at the Texas Oil Lease already. So at the far left, they call this Woodfield, and I went to the Holsinger photo collection, and they had a photo of Robert Buckwood, who they named the Woodfield. Robert Buckwood was a local aviator who was killed in World War I. All right. So the above map was done in 1931. So this is the clubhouse in the background of this photo. It must have been built in 1929. They must have quickly started building it as soon as Mr. Sturhan bought the farm. And Grover Van Devender lived in it when I was a kid. And so I always thought that Grover built it, but no, he just took over the main building of the airport and lived in it. If you're looking at Jumping Branch Farm, if you look at the entrance to it, and you look on the other side, you'll see some boxwoods right there. The house was right behind the boxwoods. I called it Grover's Spanish house, but actually he didn't build it. It was the, quote, clubhouse that's shown on the other map. And so the Holsinger photos, I think this is the only one that has a picture of the clubhouse in the background. The clubhouse has been torn down now. Okay, we can go on to the next one. This is right behind the clubhouse. Then they had all these benches. I think people came out here and watched the planes come in and out. And you'll notice that the hangar is on the very left, far back of this photo. Okay, we can go on to the next one. Now, I did search the Holsinger photos, and it had some photos of the African-American Carters, and I tried to come up with some who were at Foxfield, but I couldn't prove that the Carters in the Holsinger collection were the Carters at Foxfield. Okay, so then I thought the Dixie Flying Service was bankrupt and went out of business, and then I looked online, and it looks like the Ludington Airlines bought the Dixie Flying Service, but not the land. And then Ludington later on merged with Eastern Airlines. And they also give what type of airplanes the Dixie Flying Service used. And so the top photo you're looking at is one from the Holsinger collection from Foxfield, and then the yellow one, second one, is the Fokker, Super Fokker, I think, model is what they're saying. Right. Yeah. Okay, we can come down to, so Ludington bought just the airline itself, but not the land. So Grover buys parcel A on this map in 1935. So Edward Stronhan apparently went bankrupt, and I think his father bought the land, Edward, and then Edward was the one that sold to Grover. So Grover buys in two parcels, A and B, one from the National Bank, the other one from the Dixie Flying Service. Okay, we can go to the next one. Now, on the Fox, so this is some pictures of Grover that I got off the internet. Beth Sutton did a good article in 2010 that I'm getting a lot of the pictures from. And so her article is available online, and we can go on to, like I said, I looked there are some Harrises in the Holsinger collection and some Carters, but I couldn't prove that they were the exact ones at Foxfield. So Grover owns the farm for many years from the 30s on, and he died in 1974, leaving the property to his daughter, Mary Huff, and grandchildren. And they kept the farm about 2 years and then sold to Marion Tejeda in 1976. A survey before the sale is below, and more from the 2010 Sutton article. Okay, we can go on to the next one. So then I went to the Albemarle Historical Society and looked in their folder and in their Foxfield folder and just tried to get a visual one. They have an article that was done 10 years after the races started, and it has every horse that won the first 10 races. But since it had been so many years since that time, I thought about doing a chart of the winners of the first 10 races, but it's been another so many years since then. I didn't know if I could do that time. So I just did a little map, this map of I think this is the first map done when the first time the races were held, and an article of incorporation of Foxfield steeplechase that Miss Tejeda, I think, did while she was still living. All right, we can go on the next one. So there were some very good pictures of Miss Tejeda in the Foxfield folder. This one on the left with the big fireplace, the Farmington hut had their building. I remember it as being almost right across the street from the Hunt Country Store. And they had a big main room with a big fireplace. So I think this is Mrs. Tejeda planning the first races in the old Farmington Hunt building, which has now been torn down. And so Elizabeth Taylor came to the races one year. And all right, we can go to the next one. So this is just a summary of what I've gone over. So I think I will turn it back over to Tom at this point to introduce Kelsey.
Well, thank you, Sam. And like Sam said, this will definitely be available and saved for anyone to dig into. As I've always enjoyed Sam's talks, there's a wealth of information that he has gathered during his time as a historian. I'll call him a historian because he does the hard work of digging into the chancery suits and court records and maps and everything, and tries to put it together into a cohesive whole, and really appreciate what he's done here. So, and when that said, what I would like to do now is introduce Kelsey Cox, who is the new executive director for Foxfield Races. And I think she's going to have a few slides here, so we'll give her an opportunity to share that and introduce herself to us all. So Kelsey, there you go.
Great. Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Sam. That was wonderful. I know that many of us probably have put together a lot of notes. I have a few that I want to follow up on, so I'll be emailing you for sure. I'm going to go ahead and share a screen just so if there's any information you would like to capture and to find. So as Sterling said, my name is Kelsey Cox. I am the new executive director of Foxfield Racing. I most recently have been a first grade teacher, so just leaving the classroom as of last Friday, and excited to work with our community here in a different way. And so I would love to connect with you all. I'm happy to share my email address later as well. And so along with the wonderful board that has been put together most recently, I am doing a lot of work around the understanding and the respect of the past, but then also looking towards the future of Foxfield. So here is our wonderful group of board members that have come together and put lots of time and energy into that preservation, and then also thinking about what it will look like for Foxfield for the future. And so this group of board members has really started to think about that preservation and conservation of open space. As many of you all would agree, that's such a valuable piece to our neighborhood and to our surrounding area in Albemarle. And so we've put together a few pieces that will value that racing culture. Oops, joy. And so thinking about how we can maintain and really build for the future of our racing. And so these are a few pieces that we put together, especially thinking about leveraging and making wonderful, safe, enjoyable races, including the safety of our community, building up that infrastructure around our race as well. You've probably seen that the hangar has a lovely new paint job, a new sign to come, and really taking care of the fields. And that again, we'll circle back to even better races. We're also looking at continuing to work with our community. So that goes along with our charitable organizations that we're partnering with. And so we're focusing on our social justice piece for the fall and providing support for them, and then also for our healthcare portion in the spring. And so then that also kind of brings in our sponsorship piece. We have a large group of people that have come together and are willing to collaborate for the fall, and then looking for many other businesses and individuals to work with in the spring. And the last piece is our branding and marketing work that we've been working on. You'll probably see that new logo reflected on the hangar here in the next couple of weeks. And we're really just trying to think about how we can honor that past and make certain that Foxfield continues that safe, enjoyable, community-oriented portion that we all really want to continue to build. And then the last piece is, here is our wonderful philanthropic partner for the fall. And so we are really excited to be working with Habitat for Charlottesville and working with Dan down in Southwood as we continue our partnership and thinking about how we can continue that community feel through Charlottesville. Excellent. And that's all I have, except for we look forward to seeing you on October 3rd for our fall races, building in that safety, that family-oriented piece, thinking about the community. And you'll see this sign soon on our hangar. And feel free to email me if you have any questions, would like to come out and meet with me, share your stories, maybe even collaborate with Sam in the future and learn a little bit more and think about our personal connections to Garth Road and Charlottesville and Foxfield. Excellent. Thank you all so much for letting me join.
Thank you very much, Kelsey. Looks like one of your teacher friends is in the audience saying somebody needs to be put in a waiting room for drawing on your screen like that.
I did not call them out, though. It's okay. It happened.
Yeah. So for the races in October, people can go to the Foxfield website and buy their tickets. And
yeah,
is it going to be like races as normal, or is it? I mean, how are you approaching that with everything?
Yeah, absolutely. So luckily, things have been a little bit safer and feeling like we are able to be all together. We're going to continue to evaluate it as we get closer. It's hard to tell. But we will be maintaining all of our races. So right now we're set to have 6 full races, 7 potentially. So starting at 12:30 on October 3rd, we're going to be ready.
Okay. And I think just, I don't know if you understand a little bit of the background of where Foxfield Races has come. Like, I understand the property is put under conservation easement. So, you know, it's basically it's being preserved in perpetuity with those easements.
Absolutely. And that's about part of that infrastructure piece, is how can we take care of that and so that it is able to be available for future generations to enjoy. So, yeah.
So is it just the races 2 times a year, or are you looking at other possible opportunities?
So we're evaluating some. We have a subcommittee that is looking at those different pieces. We obviously need to follow our easement restrictions and guidelines, and also just taking care of our course so that things aren't overused. So right now we're looking at spring race and fall race, but obviously evaluating some other possibilities.
Okay. I see there's a few questions come in. Just for you, Sam, how much of Ellensville was populated by African Americans? You aware?
Well, the 1867 personal property tax shows quite a few people in the area. I don't know. Of course, Owensville is a tiny little crossroads. I don't know that it was a big African-American community. Of course, the K family owned that big piece by the river. But for the most part, I think most African-Americans lived on farms owned by whites. I don't think Owensville was an African-American hamlet. So, but there was quite a few living on farms around the area by the personal property tax.
Okay. And Shelley asked, the Harris family is an African-American family?
Yes. And there are some Harrises in the Holsinger photo collections, but the Harris is such a common last name. I couldn't identify exactly a Harris that was at Foxfield, so I didn't. I thought about just putting, okay, these are all the Harrises, but I couldn't prove that they were at Foxfield. But maybe something can be done at some point.
Mm-hmm. What links did you find to the Wood property during the Civil War period at Farmington?
So Warner Wood owned Farmington, and Woodfield, Robert Wood, that the Woodfield is named after, has the same last name, Wood, but I don't think, and I could be wrong, I don't think Robert Wood was related to Warner Wood, or else it would have been pretty distant. My mother, her maiden name was Wood. I don't know if you should say that on the internet for security reasons, but I think she used to joke with a descendant of Warner Wood that they were cousins, but they weren't really. I guess we were from the poor branch. But I think Wood was the most common surname in Albemarle of whites at the time of the Civil War. So there were just tons of people with the last name of Wood. And Woods, W-O-D-S, but I think Warner Wood was Warner Wood with no S at the end. Yeah, Wood and Woods are definitely two separate families.
Well, it makes it easy to figure them out, right? Mm-hmm.
The Jones versus Jones Chancery case is 1964, and it is at the courthouse because I looked at it. I don't remember the first name of the Joneses. Obviously, the Joneses were descendants of Tom Carey. The 1964 of Grover Van Deventer buying the Carey farm might tell who the first name of the Joneses were. But there's an index of chancery cases at the courthouse. So what you would do is go to 1964 and find Jones versus Jones that way. Or I can go through my notes and try to find it.
Okay. Yeah, you got ahead of me on the list. I didn't know where you were going, but I saw Diane ask that question. So
I just saw it right in front of me.
Yeah. I guess one for Kelsey here. A question from New Jersey: is legalized betting allowed at the races?
Tricky question.
It's only your first day on the job. So.
Yeah, we will not be doing that legally. And I do not think that we will be providing any kind of betting for Foxfield. To be continued.
Gotcha. Okay. And then Jane asks, how do you expand the understanding of the history of the races to those who attend? Oh, good question. So are you having any kind of interpretive displays or anything telling the history?
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's part of that marketing and brand awareness. It's not just trying to fit it into one day during that spring and that fall race, but really how are we getting that knowledge of Foxfield and the area around and building that throughout the year. And so looking at some different programs, especially collaborating with you, Tom, and some of the work that you're doing, Sam, and thinking about what that's going to look like, not just one day out of the year as people come flooding into our area. It's like, what would that look like so that we can have that that love and that passion for giving back to our community, that understanding.
Very cool. Yeah, you love and passion. So I have to ask, going from a first grade school teacher to executive director for a steeplechase race, where'd that come from? Community.
A group of 6 and 7 year olds, but a group of adults and also some 6 and 7 year olds as they're coming with family, and how to continue to expand in Charlottesville. So I did a lot of work with the Boys and Girls Club and thinking about how we can all work together and support each other in different ways. And so Foxfield was a great opportunity to grow and to do that.
Well, great. Well, it sounds like the beginning of a new and cool adventure for you.
Absolutely, yeah.
I guess, I don't know if you saw, there's a Raina for you, Sam, saying that her and her husband lived in your old parents' house.
Oh, okay.
Discovered that the builder was your mother, my high school French teacher.
Yes.
So it's a small world out there.
Yes.
Let's see, you see anything else that's come through, Sterling? Anything through
I would
email?
like
Or
to
anything?
ask Mr. Towler a question.
Sure,
Okay.
go ahead, Mr. Payne.
I grew up in Albemarle County, but I now live in Oklahoma, and I enjoy your Zoom lectures. You mentioned a farm on the north side of Garth Road, just west of the store.
Wingate.
Wingate. My father bought that. And I'm trying to remember the year. I was away either in college or in the service at that time. The boxwood are his love. He spent the Second World War in England with the 8th Air Force and came back with a great love of English names, but the love of boxwood he had before he went to war.
I always thought that was a fabulous entrance to that farm.
He worked
Do you
on
know
that.
if it dates back as far as Bezaleel Garth? Was it his house? Do you know if it dates back that far or?
I don't know, it's before our time,
Yeah, right.
long before.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Mr. Payne. Appreciate it. Thank you for joining us from Oklahoma. It's why I kind of enjoy these Zoom meetings. And we're hoping to try to probably continue stuff like this, even when we get back to in-person activities, because I think this allows us an opportunity to interact in ways that we might not have ever thought we could do. So pretty cool. Let's see.
The Fogelman and Sutton articles, so I found them by doing a general Foxfield Races on the internet, and that's how I found Sutton's and Fogelman's articles. So you might just do a general Google search and do Foxfield Races Best Sutton, and I'm sure you can find it, or Foxfield Races Jane Fogelman, and you should be able to find it just by doing a general Google search.
Thank you, Sam. And somebody else had an idea about creating some type of archive, digital archive that we could you could go to share Foxfield photos from over the years. I think that's a fabulous idea. We'll look into that. Maybe that's something we can partner with. And I don't see any more other questions coming in. Got way too many screens over here. Sorry, when I go look the other way, it's trying to figure out which way is up sometimes. Well, thank you, Sam. Thank you, Kelsey. We really appreciated you joining us. I know it was kind of hard for you, running down 2 jobs there over the past month, and then me constantly like harassing you with phone calls and emails saying,
No.
are you gonna join us? But completely understand where you're coming from, drinking from the fire hose with a job. So
Thank you for including me. That was wonderful.
no, and we hope to have this be a part of an ongoing, maybe series or something, or something that we can do in person. We can bring Sam and his immense knowledge of the area out to Foxfield, and we can have a walk around the property. He can show us where the hangar used to be and the clubhouse used to be, and all these various things that he pointed out to us.
We would love that. And if you don't mind, I'll pop my email address into the chat in case anybody would like to connect with me.
Great. Go ahead. And
Great.
thank you all again for joining us tonight. Wanted to, let's see. Just remember, everything we do as your historical society is because of your support. So I put my name and number, and it's my cell phone number and my email. So feel free to give me a call. I'm very interested in talking to anybody who's willing to help us out with meeting our challenges. Our speaker series is brought to you by the Albemarle Charlottesville Historical Society and wonderful supporters like you. Thanks again to Sam Towler and Kelsey Cox for Zooming with us today, and thanks to everyone out there for joining us. I'm Tom Chapman. Sterling Howe is manning the technical side of things, and we hope to see you for the next speaker series. And till then, stay safe and support local history. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.